You're listening to the Doctor Is In podcast. This is the show where you get the best tips, tricks, and nutritional hacks to help you and your family get healthier. You'll also hear what works and what doesn't work so you don't have to waste your time and money. All right, let's get started.
Hello, I'm Dr. Martin Jr.
I'm Dr. Martin Sr.
And this is the Doctor Is In podcast, and this is episode 152. And today what we want to do is we want to talk about inflammation. Specifically, there are 3 studies that have kind of come out over the last little bit of time that really start to shed some light on the effect that inflammation is having on everything from aging to mortality. And the funny thing with inflammation is that most of you have probably heard this by now, that inflammation is the root or the cause of all disease. And to a certain extent, that's true. However, if you've listened to our podcast, you're going to know what we're going to say next. Inflammation is not Houdini. It's not a magician. It doesn't just show up without something causing it. Inflammation is the effect, right? It's cause and effect. So something has to cause that inflammation. And then that inflammation becomes the cause of something else, right? It's like a domino. We always, when we do an online presentation or we do a presentation, we like to show the dominoes just falling, right? Something pushes the dominoes to fall down, and then inflammation just kind of takes over from there. So what we want to do is we want to talk about inflammation because, again, if you are having symptoms today, the cause of those symptoms is inflammation. However, we're going to talk about what's causing that inflammation as well. But at the end of the day, inflammation is something that is a serious issue when it comes to health. And a lot of people don't really understand how to properly get rid of it. So there's really, and you know, it's the funny things, we'll talk about this at the end, but there's 2 approaches in a sense. There's lower the inflammation now so that the symptoms go down, but then you have to also fix the cause of the inflammation. And that's more of a long-term thing. But we're going to talk about that. So I know you and I off air, we talk a ton about inflammation. We talk a ton of the effect that it's having all over the body. So what we wanted to do was look at 3 studies, as we mentioned, and we'll kind of talk through them. The first one I find very fascinating because it has to do with biological aging. Now, maybe you can explain the difference because there's a difference between chronological aging and biological aging.
Yeah. And we've talked about this in the past in the sense that, you know, you might be 80 years old living within your cells are only 60 years old, really. I mean, in a sense, they're 50 or 60 years old. And then you get people that are 40 years old, calendar age, that live in an 80-year-old body. It's breaking down very rapidly. We can actually measure that to some extent when you look at the results of aging, which one of them is free radical damage, oxidative damage. We start rusting out, right? And when you have accelerated aging, you might be young, right? You might be, calendar-wise, you might be young. I use the example of you get 5-year-olds that have all sorts of issues, and physically, and their cells look like they're 30 years old already. They're starting to age very rapidly. They're usually bad eaters and things like that. So, yeah, I mean, the idea is, look, everybody ages. It's just that some age much more rapidly, right? And we're talking the reason why. We'll give you one of the reasons today.
Yeah, and you know, one of our biggest beefs with the anti-aging industry in general is that they're focused on the skin, right? The outward effect, when really you age on the inside and the skin is just a reflection of that. And you and I have said this before, especially when we did our Age-Proof Your Brain training that we did. You know, we talk about how you can be the best looking person with Alzheimer's, right? Because your skin, I mean, there's more to aging than skin. However, because skin is your largest organ, that if your insides are healthy, your skin is generally pretty healthy as well. That's something. But all right, so let's talk about one study that I find fascinating, and it looks at the effect or the accelerator of biological aging. Because one of the things that you brought up is the difference between your actual age versus your biological age, and how some people have a biological age that's much older than it should be. And it comes down to the question then is, why is that? You know, why do some people have a biological age that seems to be a lot older than somebody else does? Well, it turns out that it has to do with chronic inflammation. So systemic or chronic inflammation is what this study looked at, and they call it the accelerator of biological aging, right? So again, I'm 45 years old. I just recently turned 45. If I had a lot of systemic chronic inflammation, then my biological age may be a lot older than that. And the reason for that, according to studies, would have to do with inflammation. And again, if you look at the grand scheme of things, something causes that inflammation, but it's not until the inflammation starts to show up that your cells start to rapidly age. So the nice thing is that as we go and reverse engineer inflammation, you can catch it before. And even if you got inflammation, you can still squash it, right? Mm-hmm. And then it's amazing what happens inside the body when that occurs. But so basically what they're finding out now is that you age on the inside directly related to the amount of inflammation, how long that inflammation is there for, right? So when we talk about biological aging, or if you want to talk true anti-aging, it would be keeping inflammation down or non-existent. That'd be the best way to keep your cells from aging. Now, a lot of people talk about like the telomeres and all that kind of stuff, right? And I find telomere, which goes right down into the DNA fabric of everything, I find them interesting because research has shown that the longer your telomeres are, the longer you're going to live. Yeah. Right?
Because that's your repair mechanism within the cells.
And right? I use the analogy all the time when talking to people, as I said, think of your telomeres as the length of your candle wick in a sense, right? Because that's what they look like. They're little end caps at the end. And when they're nice and healthy and long, you get a long burn. When they're not, you're in trouble. Now, here's the thing. If you want to reverse or slow down aging, especially biological age, you can't, chronologically, you're going to get older. But if you want to maintain health, you have to control inflammation. And here's the thing. How does that inflammation show up? And there's a lot of ways when it comes to biological age. So we're just talking here strictly biological aging. We're going to look at some other forms of inflammation. So what we're going to talk about for the next little bit here is inflammation that causes biological aging. And what they found is that, well, first, here's the big one, free radical damage, right? Yeah. Because free radical damage, a lot of the early theories of aging, and a lot of people still hold them because there's still a definite effect, is what they call free radical damage. The very oxygen we breathe is also slowly rusting us out. You use the analogy all the time of an apple. You cut it up, you leave it on the counter, it turns brown. Well, the same things are happening to a certain extent to us on the insides. We're rusting out. So free radical damage, and the more free radical damage we have, the more potential inflammation we have, because it's the free radical damage that leads to inflammation that leads to aging, right? So free radical damage is one way that you can get inflammation.
Yeah, and you got to remember that in the 70s when at least I first started talking about free radical damage, it was smoking, right? And we didn't know all the ramifications of the inflammation and that. We didn't. We knew free radicals, though. And we saw that biological aging in smokers. I mean, smokers generally age very quickly. They get into their 50s, they don't get away with smoking anywhere. I didn't get lung cancer. Yeah, but you look like you're 90 years old.
Oh, yeah.
Your skin,
It's hard to cheat smoking, right? And the funny thing with smoking is everybody points to that one uncle who lived to 97 and smoked 3 packs a day, right? Like, everybody has that one person that they know that does that. And they're like, well, yeah, I mean, Uncle Bob lived to 94 and he smoked every day. Yeah. Well, that's Uncle Bob. For the average person, that's not the case. However, you're right. I mean, smoking is a great free radical accelerator, and you see the effects that it has on aging. Hair, right? I mean, the effect it has on hair, skin. So you're right. I mean, the smoking was a great indication of what free radical damage does. Now, there are other things that can cause rapid free radical damage. Obviously, right? Pollution is another big one.
Environment, right?
Environment's another big one. Lifestyle habits, eating. Right? Certain ways that we eat cause a tremendous amount of free radical damage that goes on. So free radical damage is one way that we get into this chronic inflammation. But here's another one that I find interesting that the study looked at when it looked at the theories of why we get this chronic inflammation that leads to biological aging. One of them is something that you talk about in the clinic all the time, which is glycation. Right? Yep. Glycation is an interesting cause of inflammation. And if you're listening, you're not sure what glycation is, you want to just explain what that is?
Well, it's, again, they call it glycation end products, and that is when you have sugars that, in the diet, they cause a multitude of things, but when you get down to the bottom line, what does it do? It literally is aging of the cells, right? It's like burning toast. It's one of the best examples I can think of. You get toast, put them in the thing and burn them. That's glycation. Like that, you know what you see there. You see, oh, gee, that doesn't look good, right? They're burnt. And that's what glycation does. Glycation just ages the cells rapidly. But glycation comes from food. Glycation end products are coming from sugars. And the sugar is the new smoking, right? We always talk about that. Like, I like to use the illustration in my office with patients, say, well, look, I've gone through 3 generations, right? In the sense that in the 50s, I was a little boy, and you look back and you go, okay, medically, well, the people were eating, 5, 10 pounds of sugar a year on average. Maybe some were eating more than that, but just generally. And when you were a kid in the 70s, all 4 of my kids were born in the 70s, you guys were consuming 25 pounds of sugar a year. Now it's 200 pounds. That's 180, 200 pounds on average. That causes an enormous amount of glycation, what they call glycation end products. It ages the cells.
I was listening one time to an interview that an orthopedic surgeon was giving, and he talked about the effect that glycation is having on the joints. And of course, glycation, one of the ways that you can see what it looks like is the caramelization. It looks like caramel, right? Yeah. So one of the end products, it looks like caramel. And
so the joints change.
And that's what he was saying, is that this orthopedic surgeon was talking about how he was going into these joints for people that are having a ton of joint issues. And the joints have become caramelized, like almost like you have all this junk in the joints that's causing all these issues. And the only way that gets there is dietary. So people can have a ton of joint issues strictly from the way that they're eating. And the way that they're eating can increase the inflammation up big time, and it can affect the health of the joints, right? Yeah. Which is why a lot of people, once they clean up their diet, it's amazing, even their joints feel a lot better, right? Yeah. But that caramelization of the joints is something interesting. So that's another way. So you have, on one hand, you have free radical damage. Then you have this glycation, this blood sugar issues that people have nowadays that can cause this inflammation that leads to aging faster. Then there's something else they call dysregulation of the immune system. Now, I'm going to tell you that the main cause of that is leaky gut syndrome, right? Leaky gut syndrome absolutely will dysregulate. It will mess up your immune system big time because, and here's the thing, your immune system, once it gets triggered and there's something always triggering it, it's like a bull in a china shop at some point. When you get a real targeted inflammation reaction and you don't have a lot of inflammation, your inflammation, all those cells, they're like Navy SEALs, right? They come in there, they're very accurate, they do their job, they come in, they come out, they go in. I remember when we were in Puerto Rico a couple of years ago, and we were taking a cab we were in San Juan, we were taking a cab up to that massive fort, just gorgeous, right? Yeah. And on the way up there, there's a hill where at the bottom of the hill, it looks like a slum area. And I was joking, just kind of joking, because I was talking to the cab. I said, well, can we just stop down there? He said, no, don't go down there. It's drug kingpins. That was a while ago. We were back there again recently, and it's cleaned up a lot. And he said, U.S. Navy SEALs got dropped off a mile offshore, swam there in the middle of the night, came in, took the drug lord, and got him out of there. And they just, nobody even knew what happened, right? They went in surgically, got the guy, and left. That's your immune system. Yeah. Immune system at first, if it's working well, is very targeted. It goes after those foreign invaders. It does its job. And
sees a virus, sees a bacteria. Yeah.
Yep. Navy SEALs train. Yeah. Let's go.
T cells are in.
The T cells are in. The problem is if there's always inflammation, well, now it's no longer acting like Navy SEALs. They're like untrained military. They're just shooting everything. They're just tired. They're overworked. And they start to damage your own cells. And that's how you get
friendly fire.
That's how you get autoimmune disorders, right? Your body mistakes something it shouldn't go after, and it starts to go after it. Rheumatoid, it's attacking joint cells, right? I mean, that's what happens. So when you have chronic inflammation, especially because leaky gut has a unique way of causing systemic inflammation, because the contents of your junk are literally leaking into your blood.
And they go everywhere.
And your immune system is just activated. It's just like it's got foreign invaders everywhere. It's going in and it's just destroying everything. So that's one way that your immune system becomes dysregulated. So, which tells you that leaky gut, the health of your gut, determines in a lot of ways your biological age. If somebody has a bad gut, just a gut that's just not working well, and they got leaky gut and all those things, their biological age is going to be higher. It's impossible not to be, right? It's impossible not to be. So that's another thing. Here's another thing that I found very interesting when looking at that study that talked about the different ways that you can have inflammation that leads to increased biological aging. Changes in hormonal functions. So think about it. Hormones, sometimes inflammation can mess up your hormones, and sometimes
hormones can mess up you.
Can cause inflammation. And you and I, we talk about this all the time. The 3 hormones that cause the most havoc inside of a person that can cause a ton of inflammation is cortisol, estrogen, one way or the other, right? Estrogen dominant, so they got either too much estrogen, too low progesterone, or a combination of them both, and thyroid hormones. Once those things get messed up, inflammation can cause that, or they get messed up and they cause inflammation.
Yeah.
Right? So that's another thing. So the typical person who's got a lot of hormonal symptoms, their biological age is much higher. It's impossible not to be because they're just creating chronic inflammation. And we see that every day.
Yeah.
That's a big
part of our testing and our...
That's right. We see that all the time. So there are a lot of women who are aging faster on the inside because their hormones have triggered an inflammatory reaction in their body. Again, I find that quite interesting, right? So, and here's the thing. This study looked at all the effect. So we just listed a bunch of ways that you can have high inflammation. And here's the outcome. This is what's interesting. So why does it matter aside from biological aging, right? Well, when you start to age faster on the inside, so this is my theory or hypothesis. It's not even worth a cup of coffee at Tim Hortons, right? You have a trigger that causes inflammation. Inflammation ages your cells faster, and then you're set up now for disease, right? So we talked about over the years all the different ways that you can cause inflammation. Once inflammation's triggered, your cells age faster, you get a ton of mitochondrial dysfunction, and then now disease sets in. And that can show up for some, and this is what they looked at, it can cause type 2 diabetes, right? Glycation and all those things can cause an effect of the beta cells, cause all these issues with that. So here's what they looked at now. So now that your cells are aging faster, now it can show up as type 2 diabetes. In others, it may show up as Alzheimer's disease. In other, cardiovascular. In others, frailty, osteoporosis. Others, sarcopenia, cancer. Think of the effect that chronic aging has. But it doesn't, like, you don't just get inflammation now and then get cancer tomorrow.
Yeah.
And we talk about that a lot anyways, how you don't go to bed healthy tonight and wake up with a disease tomorrow. There's a process. And the part of that process is something has to trigger inflammation. And then inflammation then triggers a whole whack of aging on the inside. It triggers a ton of immune system attacking everything. It creates all these issues. And then now your cells are aging faster. Then they're diseased. And that could show up in a whole bunch of different ways. So I found that study quite interesting when it came to the effect that inflammation is having on your biological age, because you and I, we can't fix aging chronologically. You're going to get older every year. What a person can do is they can control their biological aging to a certain extent. And how great is it if you can have a biological age that's younger than your chronological age? And we see that kind of stuff all the time, right? So that's what's interesting. So that's the first study. Now, the other study that I want to talk about here actually has to do with brain cells, because I'll tell you, brain is becoming a major problem. We've talked about this before. Dementia is the number one killer in the UK, right? Number one killer in the UK. It's coming to North America. It's climbing the charts, right? It's like somebody just released a new album and it's climbing the charts. That's dementia. Dementia is climbing the charts. It's going to move up here. We're going to see it because dementia and diabetes are so tightly related. And now that diabetes is exploding, and even if you don't have technically diabetes, you still have blood sugar issues. It's going to cause all these brain. We're going to see it in North America.
Yeah.
So we're starting to see the effect of all this dementia. Scary stuff, right? So here's a study that came out looking at one of the major causes of brain cell loss. And of course, it's inflammation. But as you and I, we did a training not long ago called Age Proof Your Brain, and we're going to put that back up on our website in a little bit again. I'll tell you, nothing will age your brain faster than inflammation. Inflammation is the cause. However, again, what causes that inflammation? But what's interesting is they found, so now you have this uncontrolled inflammation that's occurring. And what's happening is a lot of, and this is kind of what we talked about before just a few minutes ago, but a lot of the immune response in your brain is actually mounted by a very specific type of immune cell. It's specialized to your central nervous system and your brain. It's like they call microglial cells. So these microglial cells are like specialized soldiers that are found in your central nervous system, your brain and all that stuff. These guys are the immune. They're like the sergeant or the colonel. They're the top general. And these guys come in, they do their job. But what they're finding out is that when you have chronic uncontrolled inflammation, these microglial cells go crazy. They start to attack everything, even your healthy brain cells, and it starts to kill them. So now they're always kind of wondering how inflammation causes brain issues. They're starting to see now that the effect it's having on your brain cells, which is very interesting. We already know that chronic inflammation caused by stuff like high insulin or smoking from before or obesity or high blood pressure will shrink your brain faster. So now imagine now it's like a double whammy. So imagine now these things are shrinking your brain matter. So your brain actual volume is shrinking as you get older, and it's shrinking too fast. And then the cells that are left in there are actually getting destroyed by your own immune system because of inflammation. So you can see why a brain can go downhill fast, and it can go quickly on some people, right? Which again would tell you that if you want to keep your brain healthy, you have to reverse the effects of inflammation. And you have to figure out what's causing that inflammation in the first place, which is what we do with our biomarker testing, and there's a whole bunch of different ways to do that. However, it's really fascinating that we're starting to get a better picture of inflammation, right? And we're starting to understand what's causing these inflammations. You and I have always maintained that the three biggest causes of inflammation, high circulating insulin, leaky gut syndrome, and free radical damage.
Yeah.
I would add a fourth now, and you and I have talked about this. Uncontrolled hormones, cortisol. We would add those hormones in there. Cortisol out of whack will cause inflammation, will kill your gut lining, will do a whole bunch of stuff and cause all these effects, right? So you almost have to add that fourth thing in there. So it's really, really fascinating stuff. Now, all right. So we've been talking a lot about inflammation. Let's talk about, from a natural standpoint, how to control it. Now, of course, diet is massive, right? Diet's massive. You look at the consumption of vegetable oils, all those crap, fatty, fake fats that they have in vegetable oils, the inflammatory reaction they cause. You get rid of a lot of that stuff. You keep your sugar levels healthy by eating a lower sugar and a carb level that you can tolerate, because everybody has a different tolerance level. People always say, and as an aside, they're like, well, how can I eat more carbs? It's like, well, if you're not metabolically damaged, put on more muscle because you have more glycogen storage. You can, right? I mean, it affects the amount, but that's a talk for another day. But so diet, we know diet. We talk about low carb all the time.
Always low carb.
And low
Keeping
carb
your
is
insulin down.
It's such a subjective thing. It can mean different things for different people. Some people have to go ketogenic because they're so messed up and they got so much inflammation. They got so much neuroinflammation that they got to go so low carb that they're actually burning ketones for energy. Other people don't have to do that. They could do well 75 grams, 100 grams of carbs. It just depends on, it's such an individualized thing, which is something that we address in our serial killer diet program that we have. We talk about how to figure out what your carb tolerance is. But that's one. All right, so now aside from diet, if I come and see you and I have just systemic inflammation, I know, figure out the cause, right? And we listed the big causes. Yeah. Is it leaky gut? Is it high circulating insulin? Is it messed up hormones? Or is it free radical damage? So once you identify that, you fix that, and then you lower inflammation. How do you lower inflammation?
Well, I mean, in terms of diet, again, we know that, right? It's always low carb because insulin is a growth hormone. It creates inflammation. So we already know that. Everybody knows that, listens to us on the podcast. We're never going to change, by the way, when it comes to carbs. And secondly, oil. You want to up your good fat. Because the problem, and you said it earlier, the problem with, like they did a study, you and I talked about this, I think, on the last podcast. They do studies on omega-3 and whatever, and they go, you know what, it doesn't really work. Well, first of all, it doesn't work for a couple of reasons. One, they don't use enough, and secondly, they don't take into account how much omega-6 you're taking.
Yeah,
because that ratio is what has changed in my lifetime is that ratio. How much vegetable oils, the crappy
18 to 1 now.
Industrial.
18 times.
Yeah,
the average person eats 18 times more omega-6 than omega-3.
Yeah, so once you elevate by eating grass-fed beef, by eating fish, by your good oils.
Yeah, we love DHA. We love EPA.
Oh, you know what I mean? Like it's
all right,
good,
so
right?
High levels of DHA or EPA.
Yeah.
Then we also love for inflammation. Absolutely love curcumin.
I can't get over.
And especially, we talked about this, but the combination, research really shows the powerful combination that curcumin and DHA have together. It's almost like they're a dynamic duo.
Bonnie and Clyde.
Yeah, they're meant to be together, right? So a very powerful way to lower systemic inflammation is high levels of DHA and bring up and take a good curcumin, right? We love the combination of those two things. And again, identify what's causing that inflammation to show up in the first place. If you have leaky gut, fix your leaky gut. If you have high levels of free radical damage, fix that. If you have messed up hormones, fix your hormones.
Probiotics.
Yeah, probiotics across the board,
broad
right?
spectrum, because you want to get rid of, there was a study, and I was just trying to look for it to see, and I as usual, I can't find it.
I thought you were just texting.
No, I was texting the office because they were asking me a question. But what I was...
I know, I saw you texting there. I'm like, I'm sorry to interrupt you with this podcast.
Well, a patient was asking questions.
Well,
anyway.
See, that's how accessible you are, right? But anyway, sorry, go ahead. I just thought I thought we were getting.
What was I talking about? I don't even remember now. Oh, there was a study, and I can't find it, but it was in the last week. And you know what they were saying is that one of the real things that they're finding with Alzheimer's is they're relating it back to bacterial infection in the brain, right? Like they say, well, it's bacterial, but again, we come back to leaky gut, and that's the importance of probiotics because. How the heck does bacteria get into your brain if it's because you don't, and it's not just bacteria. I always tell people, look, bacteria is not what you think it is. The worst offender is fungus. It's candida. It's yeast. Look, any bacteria, your body knows how to fight bacteria, but it don't know how to get after yeast. It's just almost
and on that
invariable.
Note, a lot of times we get questions from people on how long they should be taking probiotics. And one thing is it's important to know, like if somebody had, for example, toenail fungus, and they went to the pharmacy and they got some little drops or something to put on, a little like ointment to put on their nail, they got to do that for like 4 to 6 months. Fungus is hard to kill. I mean, that stuff there.
It's hardy.
Oh, man, that stuff is very difficult to kill.
And you're feeding it, right?
You're feeding it all the time. So, yes, I mean, there's no question. And I think something like Alzheimer's is really the end result is Alzheimer's, but the path to get there could be so different. It could come from the gut. It can come from high insulin, right? People, like they're saying, it's a type 3 diabetes. It could come from free radical damage, somebody who's been around high levels of stress or pollution. It could come from, there's a lot of ways you can end up there. And that's why I think when they do these tests, they find all these things, all these different approaches for people. I think there's a lot of ways that you can affect the brain. I think the brain is the end for, brain and heart are the two things in the end that get it, right? Like, it's very hard to do something right now to hurt your heart, but I could do something over a period of time and the heart's going to pay for it. The brain's the same way. The brain is the exact same way. It's not like one thing I do right now that's going to cause my...
No. And one of the things, too, on this study, I think it was Lisa was mentioned there. I think it was in that study, just on the brain. And people might find this interesting, is that what they were saying about Alzheimer's and dementia is it takes a long time for that process, that inflammation, the body overreacting, almost overreacting. They were saying bacteria, and it's a combination of things. But you know what they were saying? It was interesting. Once dementia starts or Alzheimer's starts, it's too late, in their opinion. Okay, yeah. It's because they're saying now that's rapid after that.
Well, and just kind of like we
so
explained,
the idea is to get it before that happens, right?
And here's the thing, and this is we're out of time, but there's another study that just popped in my head, and it showed that inflammation in midlife, right, in the 40s and 50s. We talked
about that one time.
Inflammation at midlife is one of the worst things that you could do for your brain. So somebody that has a lot of inflammation in their 40s and 50s is so much more likely to have dementia and Alzheimer's, because it's that process that it's a slow burn process. But like you said, once it starts, once somebody has dementia or Alzheimer's,
you got to turn that thing off. Yeah. Turn the burn off.
Protecting your brain as we age is got to be one of the most important priorities now, because it's just amazing when you look at the statistics right now. It's crazy what you're starting to see. So that's why, as we mentioned, we got a couple of trainings. We've talked about this before coming out on our website. Mm-hmm. We have one that we just did on IBS, and those that were in our group, our Facebook group, got a chance to watch it, and the feedback has been really good. We're going to put that up on our website very shortly. And then the other one, we have a brain one coming out. And then you and I are working on a few for different hormones. And then we're also doing one for men, because we get a lot of questions about this, on testosterone, which is a major, major issue nowadays in men.
Yeah. So ladies, get your men to listen, or you do it for them.
Yeah, and like people always say, how do I know if my testosterone level's down? It's like, how's your energy level in the evening, right? Because I'll tell you, when you got low testosterone, you're tired at nighttime, like the evening. 7 o'clock, you're dead, right? So anyway, we'll talk more about that in the future. But we gave a lot of information today. This kind of stuff really excites us because it gives us a good place to start to really protect your brain, to protect your biological aging, to keep you feeling young on the inside. So these kind of things, we really enjoy talking about these things. So if you have any questions, you can email us at info@martinclinic.com. You can go to our website, martinclinic.com, sign up for our newsletters. We talk about a lot of these things in our newsletters. As I mentioned, we're going to put a bunch of free training on our website, so you'll be able to go sign up for that soon. Every Thursday morning, you do a Facebook Live. Ton of questions. Yeah. Last time, it's getting better, but last time
the
lighting was so bright.
Because I am bright. It was me. It wasn't the lighting. It was me.
I thought like you haven't been in the sun for 3 years. I thought you were like hiding in the basement. That's how bright it was. But it's coming. You weren't upside down. You weren't sideways. This time you were just like white. It's like you just powdered your face and went on camera, right? So it's coming. It's getting better. I tell you, there's nothing that gives your grandkids a kick more than that, is watching the upside down, sideways stuff. They love it. I mean, they love it. And we get a lot of good feedback.
But I know you, because what happens, you wait for 3 or 4 days to tell me that I was upside down, or you'd be texting your mother.
Yeah, I don't want to hurt your feelings. Like, I don't want to say to you, Dad, is there a reason why you were white as a ghost? Like, did something scare you before coming on the air? I want to give it, it's like that 24-hour rule we talk about.
I might have to put makeup on.
Yeah, it's that 24-hour rule we talk about, right? Sometimes it's best to let it go, and then I'll bring it up and say, hey, by the way, just turn down the lights just a tad.
You look like Casper the Ghost.
But, I mean, listen, that's what we
it's live.
It's
what
live.
Can I tell you?
That's right. You don't know what's going to happen when you're doing live. So anyways, every Thursday morning, you answer a ton of questions, get a lot of feedback. It's awesome. So there's a lot of ways you can get a hold of us. We have live chat on our website if you want to ask questions that way. We, again, feel that it's our mission, our purpose is to, really help out or answer questions for people, because there's so much misinformation out there. A lot of bad studies coming out, a lot of bad headlines. There was another ridiculous one on probiotics this week. Stupid. Yeah. Dumb.
They got one guy, too. I just got to say this. They got a guy from one of the leading researchers in cancer. and famous, and they nailed him this week. You know why?
The guy that was on the take?
He was on the take. Millions and millions and millions of dollars.
And never disclose it.
Never disclose it.
No.
They passed all these things to the FDA and all these studies. And
yeah, when they got vacation homes on islands and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that's
brought to you by the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah, and that's the problem with studies. I actually am getting more and more frustrated. I love reading studies. I find them interesting. But I'm getting more and more frustrated now just at the lack of good study parameters or their conclusions that they're coming up with. But anyways, that's another topic for another day. But again, we want to thank you for listening to this episode and have a great day.